Give it one more minute. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike James, and I'm going to get started here on our presentation. Really excited to be talking about the working and negotiating with developers, and talking about strategies and best practices. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a urban planner with 28 years of experience. I've been fortunate to working on housing projects both in the public and the private sector. You know, as a planner early in my career, I got to engage in zoning cases, many subdivision projects here in the Valley, and also work on some development master plans, really from the public sector perspective. More recently, my experience in housing has been working either with a developer or on policy plans, working with developers as stakeholders to direct housing that's in line with the objectives of different cities, towns, and communities. So one of the things I wanted to just kind of mention for this presentation, we really have kind of four things we really want to do. We really want to kind of introduce the topic, not really take a deep technical dive, but just give you some ideas about this issue and then where technical assistance could be provided through this program. Want to provide some good examples, and then discuss some of the benefits, and then allow some time for questions and answers. Also wanted to mention, I just one of my co-presenters, Adam Cray, he's really a expert in funding and finance, and has worked on a lot of different housing types here in Arizona and across the country. He's actually working on getting logged in if he's not already on the call right now. So with that, I will go. Whoa, what's going on? Just lost my screen. Sorry. Let's see if we can do this. All right, so just a little bit about some Zoom instructions. Just wanted to point out, here's the chat feature here. We'll be looking for that. See if you have any comments or want to post a question. We can look for those there. But I think you're all available to talk as well. So we'd really be happy if you've got a question. Feel free to raise your hand or to just kind of speak up. That would be great. And just a little bit about the Zoom menu bar. If you're not familiar with it, really shows how you can do the nonverbal feedback. If you want to raise your hand, how do you do that? You basically click on participants, and then it'll show you a little range of options that you can click on there as well. So want to make sure you have as many options for communicating as possible. So really wanted to start this section with a couple of really kind of what I'll consider the basics. It really is, what the first is kind of understanding those developer needs, and all the things that they're looking to do and need to do to build successful projects, successful housings in your community. Secondly, talk a little bit about, what is your role as the public sector participation? As many of you know, if you have any kind of housing project, really is a multidisciplinary effort. You've got, in addition to planning and zoning, you've got transportation issues, police and fire, solid waste, organizing and coordinating utilities. And this is oops, excuse me, keeps going ahead. Um, and as we're looking at, the new housing options that we're seeing, the need for, we're kind of getting in some new areas of development. From the state perspective, we'll be looking at, the new ADU legislation, missing middle housing. Those are creating, some new forces that are coming into play in each of your communities. So the other thing that I would say is, working as a strategic advisor or consultant, on some of these projects based on your staff availability, project complexity, or the visibility of the project, consider when you may need trusted advisor or owner's rep. I know in some of the opportunities to work with some developers in another community, there were times when we did bring in financial experts to really dial in the costs, the opportunities, look at our risk. And that's an opportunity that you have through this technical assistance that I think is pretty exciting. So, I think most people kind of understand the developer motivations, but definitely want to hit on it. So, most of the developers that I've worked with here in Maricopa County and the Valley, they really want to meet the expectations of the jurisdiction. They want to deliver a quality product. They want to make a profit. And, they want to be able to come back and be able to do that again and work with you successfully. Some of the key challenges that the developers have really are that we see, time and time again is sometimes funding and financing requirements may not align with community priorities. Seen this with one specific example is parking, right? So lenders will often, want to really dial in on a certain amount of parking. That may be not in tune with a specific community objective, depending on where the project is. So there's always those development issues that have to be kind of aligned and work through on these housing projects. Obviously, the changing market conditions are a huge factor. Peter just had that great example of housing starts, looking at that over the last 20 years or so, and you really see, those conditions that hasn't with the housing crash, and then we had COVID slowdowns, and then we had, developers changing their land use mix based on, the post-COVID market. Recently we've seen land and commodity prices increasing, and the ever-present entitlement process and zoning that the developers have to go through, as they're a lot of times holding property that they're paying for and really trying to get those entitlements. So kind of the key thing we wanted to mention on this is really just that through the working with developers, anytime to align those interests and create those common opportunities will really move the projects forward. Another thing that I would mention really for you on the public sector is making sure that when you're communicating, working with the development, there's clarity on what is a community requirement and what is a recommendation or suggestion. You really don't want to make the developer decipher that. And I've seen situations where, maybe in a pre-application for a housing project, there's it's really hard to tell what is an actual development requirement or standard versus something the city wants. And it's perfectly great and to put in those wants and those desires. But I think it's also really good to make it sure that the developer knows why that's important to your community, particularly if it's a council, or leadership priority. So just some thoughts on that. So, in talking to developers, they really, want to ensure that those initial comments, when they're going through a pre-application, are comprehensive and thorough, because they really are going to go back and give that to their engineers and their architects and address those comments. And if something is missed, that's just another review, another comment, maybe could be another month or two or three, and just really that's on their side of the equation, that's very difficult. Having worked in government, I know that it does take a focused effort by all those departments I mentioned earlier, and in unique or high visibility cases, sometimes you really do need to take an extra effort, bring those people together ahead of time, and really ensure that you've got comprehensive comments, because you don't want to have them come back and then miss a major city or community priority. Just doesn't help the developer, and it doesn't look you or your staff represent well either. So I mentioned another thing, as you're working with developers, is help them identify those key stakeholders, whether it's the school districts, the neighborhood groups, utility providers, whoever it might be, that's going to have a stake and it's going to have a voice. You really want to encourage that communication early. Most cities have a community engagement requirement for developments, so that's happening, but you really want to make sure that all those voices get heard. Finally, I just think that and I've heard and I've worked where when clear objectives and priorities are outlined from both the developer side and the community side, it really just gives the opportunity to align those with your elected and your management perspectives and objectives. Sometimes those can be policy directives, and sometimes those can just be specific projects or initiatives. So wanted to just kind of give an example that I had in my career that I think is kind of interesting to think about. So this was here in the region, and a large subdivision was proposed. So this was proposed by a highly qualified and respected developer. The site plan was beautiful. It was certainly a high quality community. And when we're doing our review of the zoning case, the local school district sent a letter to our zoning administrator saying, yes, hey, we can accommodate the additional students of this very large subdivision. And when we got that letter, we knew there was a problem, because the community, the existing community and parents and the developer knew that the local elementary school that was going to serve this area was already overburdened. They didn't have enough room. And so that really was a hurdle for this really great community that was coming in. So what do you do? So there's no rules or regulations in your code, to what to do in this situation. So you really need to work with your management, work with your leadership, work with your electeds, and find some creative solutions. So in this case, we suggested, that the developer really, meet with some of the elected officials and brainstorm ideas about what could they really do. And so through, some meetings, negotiations, the developer came to the conclusion that, hey, there's an opportunity to build an additional building on the existing campus. They were willing to do it, it was a large enough subdivision. So that moved to a development agreement where the school district now got a new building along with this subdivision. So in my opinion, just a really win-win solution. So just wanted to share that example. So, a lot of this talks about and relates back to building relationships. As you know, working for your communities, establishing that trust and credibility will get you great projects, and it also mean that development team is going to want to come back and work with you again. So certainly a great thing to work on. Again, going back to communication on the developer side, we've got a team that includes civil engineers, architects, planners, legal staff. There's a lot of moving pieces. And so it's really important to establish those regular touch points just to make sure, hey, as we're developing this project, this housing project, as changes evidently always happen as you're going through the process, that everybody knows and that there's no surprises. As I mentioned earlier, there's also, an opportunity to leverage those existing relationships, whether it's stakeholders, whether it's the community partners, like we've discussed in this technical assistance. Those are opportunities that, through the technical assistance, we at Matrix can help you with. So we do have a design group that's working on housing, multifamily housing, civil infrastructure for housing. So we have a lot of those connections if that's something that you need as far as technical assistance. So kind of an example, the picture here I wanted to talk a little bit about. So this was a project that I was working on in the Northwest. We had a developer that was looking at several sites near a light rail station, near a high school, and the community, through their community plan, had identified this park site, but it was not secured, and it was actually one of the development sites that the developer was looking at. So in communication with the developer, with the community group, and reaching out to some funding sources, some community agencies, we found that there was actually a grant program from the local county that would contribute to funding for acquiring park sites in the county's municipality. So that was an opportunity where, with the developer and through the process of, identifying parcels for development, we could basically say, hey, we've got funding on this park site. This will be an amenity for your community. Really kind of look at these other areas and these blue buildings on the screen for your development. So that was a great opportunity, an example of how those relationships worked in kind of directing a developer to a particular site, which they did eventually choose. So wanted to just hit on some key negotiation strategies. This is another area of technical assistance. If you have a large housing project, maybe it's an affordable housing project, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a large single family project. We have folks on our technical assistance team that really can help you, whether that's negotiating with designers, developers, financing, funding. We have a full range of staff that can really do that. So just hitting on the strategies a little bit, you need to really work what's best for your community. Obviously, in negotiation, both sides are likely to have compromises, but it's important to establish some broad goals and objectives early to really kind of direct the ultimate solution and opportunity for your housing development. Another thing, when it comes to flexibility and creativity, you really need to meet the intent of your plans and not always the strict letter of the law. So, you don't want to lose a good product or a good housing partner because you've got either unique site conditions or, some aspect of the project that is, not exactly the letter of the law to maybe your zoning or your development agreement. So, those are opportunities to really be creative, be flexible, achieve the goals of your community, but also get a great project. There's some obstacles in negotiation that you really want to avoid. These, there's several on several different aspects. I'll just hit on a couple of them. Not knowing the history of the site, maybe you have to overcome a past affinity. This was a significant place to the residents that are currently there. That can be an issue. So developers can run into that. Sometimes you can come in, you can identify issues with the development where it's not addressing some of your community concerns, and you need to bring those forward. Those are some of the things that, engaging some technical assistance for a strategic advisor or owner's rep can really help you in some of these areas. I was gonna reach out and see if Adam, if you're on, I know that you've worked in this realm quite a bit. Do you have any thoughts that you wanted to share on kind of negotiation strategies? You've got to log in.
Sure, Mike. Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Yeah, no, I'd really like to just to underscore some of the things you already mentioned. And just touching on specifically the notion that government agencies should really be bargaining over broad interests and not specific terms, right? So we over the years have worked for a lot of public agencies in negotiations with large entities. We represented Anaheim in 7 years of negotiations with the Disney company, the Port of San Francisco on the reuse of the ferry building, the reuse of Denver Stapleton Airport, and sort of in all those negotiations, really one of the key things was starting out with, and it's going to sound funny that this is that it's something so simple, but it's really starting out with a plan. Often you clients bring you in and they say, well, we've got these negotiations that have to happen. We're well committed to this project and we want to move forward. We want to close this deal, and that's the goal. But really, the first thing we want to do is step back and say, how does this particular project, how does this particular negotiation fit into your broader strategy and your broader objectives as a city, as a county, as a local government, and what would a win look like? And so more often than not, clients come back to us and say, no one has ever really asked that question. What does a win look like? We're trying to get the deal closed. That's what we're trying to do. And so, you step back and you look at those broader principles, and then, you come up with some criteria. And you will have, as you mentioned, Mike, things that are non-negotiable, and those are going to be terms. There are going to be some terms that the government, the local government can't allow or need. There are going to be some things that absolutely have to occur or not occur. But everything else should really be, to your point, framed in terms of broad interests. So, criteria that moving forward, everything that a developer proposes to the city or the county, they've got to meet these, and in the case of Disney, it was 15 separate criteria, very broadly stated criteria. It's the kind of things like if you're negotiating a pilot agreement, for example, the public benefits in terms of the difference between market rents and affordable rents have to exceed the public costs as measured by how much tax you're abating in the pilot, right? Something as simple as that, and a very clear set of criteria up front, so that every decision that the developer asks the city to make is framed within those criteria and can be checked against those criteria. And often what we found is that, instead of our clients and us having to solve these problems, it puts the developers in the driver's seat and allowing them to solve their own problems, so long as they know what our broad interests are. If we come at them with, you absolutely may not do X, and don't tell them why, don't tell them what our broader goals are, they can't solve the problems. But if we come to them with those broad interests in mind and a set of criteria that are meant to execute on those broad interests, then the developer solved the problems for you in many cases.
Great, thank you, Adam. That's a great addition to this point. So one of the things that we can actually assist with on the technical assistance throughout this program is funding opportunities and assistance. So there's a lot out there, and it seems like more and more coming every day, whether there's grant programs, federal loan programs, tax credits, state and local initiatives. There's a whole list. We'll hit on these real briefly in the next couple slides, but I would also this moment take a commercial for Adam. He's going to be taking a little bit of a more in-depth presentation at 2 o'clock in the funding session. So if you want to get into that, Adam will be back again talking about that a little bit later this afternoon. So kind of just some of the programs that are out there that most of you are probably already doing some of these, maybe not all of them, but any of these funding opportunities, we have staff on our technical assistance team that really can help you dive into any of these. So whether it's community development block grant programs, home investment partnerships, other Section 811 type programs, there's the Federal Housing Administration loans, there's TIFIA loans, there's USDA development loans. There's a whole series of different loan programs that can be engaged. When it comes to the affordable housing component, there's the low-income housing tax credits that are a big part of, major part of that work. There's new market tax credits, as well as other programs for historic preservation, and ways to credit back and make some of those projects affordable and achieve some of the desires of, a wider range of housing options for your community. And in addition to that, there's the state and local initiatives, Housing Trust Fund, Home in 5, Advantage, some of those other programs that can help individual folks, achieve home ownership. Again, don't want to miss out on for our tribal communities, their specific funding. There's the Indian Housing Block Grant Program, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And then tribal designated housing entities, your own programs that you can develop. The other thing that is, used quite a bit here in Arizona, because we don't have tax increment financing, is the government property lease excise tax. That's really an opportunity to, basically a development will offer the land to the government in such that a way that they don't have to pay taxes for a certain number of years on the property taxes. And so it's really an incentive that brings down their overall cost of that housing development. So some of the other things I think are really critical for financial considerations, is that cost benefit analysis. So really digging in and understanding the viability of the project. And, that's something that I think as the public sector, you need to see that from the developers, but you also need to do your own analysis. You also need to take into consider different variables on the development, on the timing, what's going to happen if interest rates change, what's going on with the market. All of those things are really important to have a strong understanding as you're going into, particularly working with the developer on a specific housing project. The other aspect that is really critical is that financial risk management. Testing the assumptions of your cost benefit, of understanding the breadth of issues that could come in to impact your project, and really vetting those, and then also understanding the experience level and the competency of your development team is really critical. And making sure at the end of the day that if you're giving tax abatements or other credits that will account for any subsidies or benefits that the housing project is going to give back. So again, Adam, I know you're really kind of an expert in this area. Do you have any additional insights on these two items you'd like to share?
No, I think I want to build suspense for our talk at 2:00.
Okay, that's good. We'll have a cliffhanger. So if you want to know more in depth on this, come back at 2:00. So the some of the other aspects of working with developers is really assisting and navigating those zoning laws and regulations. I think most of with the new housing needs assessment law, ADU law, missing middle housing that is coming into play. There's going to be some changes, particularly with developments of over 10 acres are going to need to have some of that missing middle housing. So that's where we get into some of those issues of looking at model ordinances, looking to the league for some of the work that they've done, as well as it's an area where through this program, if you do need assistance in addressing those new housing laws, we can do that as part of the technical assistance. Really, develop those zoning amendments to allow for the ADUs in a way that works in compliance with your overall zoning, potentially your other policy documents. So also really critical is understanding those legal agreements that could be out there impacting developments, whether it's existing development agreements that run with the land. Those can be really complicated, particularly on an infill site if you're trying to get housing. There's ownership issues. There can always be ownership issues of multiple ownerships, rights for certain developments. There's covenants and codes of restrictions in certain areas that come into play. And also, there's site conditions, whether you have, making sure you have the access that you need, that works with your adjacent properties, for fire, life safety, and all those issues. So, really a lot to think about in these housing projects. Yeah, and ultimately, as you're moving a project forward, you want to ensure that compliance and accountability can happen. Often, housing projects will have stipulations or conditions that need to be met as far as the development. So you want to make sure that you're working in a way that those can actually happen and they're not another obstacle down the road that you're going to have to deal with potentially your engineering department, utilities, right away or something like that. So the next kind of section of the slides is really kind of looking at an overview of some successful projects, lessons learned, and kind of hitting on some of the best practices. And, this is really just kind of start thinking about, what does it take for that successful project? So this is really kind of this is kind of something I put together based on my experience working with some developers looking for, market rate housing, typical single family development, as well as developers in the affordable realm or workforce housing. So I think, these are some of the key strategies to be effective and meet those objectives of your community is really assemble an effective team. Sometimes larger housing projects, you really do need a strike force of folks from each of your key departments to be, come together specifically for a project can be really important. Identifying those shared goals and strategies with your developers, Adam mentioned before, I think is really, really critical to that overall success. At a certain point, the developers they like to do this early and often. They like to talk to the electeds and kind of know what's going, where they are, what would they like to see with projects, let them know things are coming along. But on the public side, as the staff side too, you also need to check in and make sure that the direction you're giving is really in compliant with both your policies and objectives, and also where leadership wants to go with the project. From that point, it's really goes through a process of, if, working with developer to target agreeable parcels or opportunities in your community. As I mentioned earlier, the example where, there were several sites around a future park. We really tried to scope in on those properties that would maintain the parkland in a way that the community could really support that development. And they did actually, when that developer came through, they were very supportive because they had worked with them on identifying kind of the best location in that neighborhood. Again, just reiterating, getting those strong agreements, MOUs, really kind of align the goals and strategies for, taking a project through the process. It can be a multi-year process, particularly if you're looking at an affordable project. So just a little bit of a moment for myself to brag a little bit. This project here in the picture is Mercy Housing project. So it's an affordable housing project. I was really fortunate to be part of an early team that had identified kind of the goals and objectives for this parcel. This parcel was a construction laydown yard for building the light rail system in South Seattle. And so we were really tired of seeing this dirt lot with a chain link fence around it. So we assembled a team of all the correct people in the city. We got the mayor's office really supporting it. And we called in all of our community partners, our funding partners, the housing associations. And we met with the landowner, which happened to be the transit agency in this case. And we're like, there's a great opportunity here for affordable housing. We have political support. We have funding behind this. So it was just it was an opportunity where everyone got together. We're like, yeah, this is a great opportunity. Let's make it happen. So, the $35 million project, includes 108 units, targeted families earning 18 to 55,000 per year. So pretty low income, particularly for this city. Again, we're really proud to have JP Morgan Chase as one of the funders and the construction lender for the project. So again, kudos to them, and as well as utilizing tax credits and a lot of other grants and funding streams, including the local housing levy. So just a kind of a picture of what I would say is a really good successful project. One of the key members of our technical assistance team, Eric Haraga, this is a project that he worked on in Denver. Again, this is in the affordable realm, 72 units. It was really developed for folks with traumatic brain injuries. Really gave them just a great location and opportunity to have housing that met their specific needs. It was ADA compliant, walk-in showers, room for wheelchairs, really accommodating for their needs. So this was a really community supportive project that really went through. Is really an amenity for the community. I know he's very proud of this project. Oops, double slide. Another project I would bring your attention to is this one's really up in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's called Timber Sky. So this was Vintage Partners here in Phoenix. They partnered with Habitat for Humanity of Northern Arizona. They've got some state funding and some other community partners. And as part of this larger master plan community, they created a starter home program with 100 units. You move in for $1,000 down payment. You have an affordable rent, and the owners, as you're renting, they keep a portion of your rent, and after 10 years, you are required to move out, but they give you a $100,000 check toward the down payment of your permanent home. So this is really trying to target that workforce type of housing where people are maybe earning maybe a little bit of lower income level, but a great housing opportunity in a great community. You can see here some of the other elements of their development. They have 200 rental units, 10% set aside for some housing, affordable housing incentives, as well as some future multifamily in the community. So again, this is just a great example here in Arizona. Another good example to look at is La Victoria Commons in Tempe. 104 apartment units, ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms. So have a variety of different housing opportunities. Really focused on that 30% EMI to be rent subsidized. And, the other thing that's really great about this location is, it's on a parcel right near light rail transit in Tempe. It's also in, a neighborhood where you think, hey, maybe this kind of density might be not encouraged, but that's not the case. So, this is a project that really worked with the community, shared their ideas, worked well with the city, and, kind of went through very easily. Another interesting project I wanted to talk about is Streamliner 67th. So this is out at 67th Avenue in McDowell and Phoenix. This was done by Greenlight Communities. So they really like to develop options for middle income earners, teachers, healthcare workers, without relying on the government subsidies. So, this is really an example of they're really trying to hit that missing middle housing market. So just a great example in Phoenix. So, this was really a joint venture between a private equity firm and affordable housing builder. A lot of units, 292 units. and you can see the price range there, 1,000 up to 13. It's not in the technical affordable range usually, but for that lower middle income earner. So another just really good example. Another really interesting project is the Tempe microestates. So this was a project that was really developed with the Newtown Community Land Trust, where they basically, own and control the land and then rent the units, really providing an option for lower rents for the community in Tempe. You know, really kind of caters to someone who doesn't need a lot of space. Maybe they're a student, maybe they just are really getting that first, home away from home, but they have a place of their own that's very, very quality. You can kind of see some of the characteristics there. So kind of on the regulatory side, this was submitted as a planned area development, which really gave the developer and the city some flexibility, where they could modify some of the setbacks, make the site work, make the finances work, and also take advantage of some of the city's development policies. Being close to the rail corridor, they had reduced parking requirements, and other ways that this development could really fit in with the objectives the city of Tempe wanted to have for new housing development. So want to have some time for questions and answers, but I just kind of want to hit on some key conclusions and best practices. Developing that understanding of the developer needs is important. On the public side, knowing that this is a multidisciplinary effort, you're going to have many team members to make this all come together. When you need to, bring in those specialists. Use this technical assistance for elements of projects that you would like to. Understand market forces and timing are critical, and they're probably going to change the project in the life of the project. Things are not going to be the same as they come through the door on day one. Talked about the working closely and developing those relationships, developing priorities. There's obviously, as you're getting into different housing types, understanding those key negotiation strategies, what positions and strategies and objectives you need to fulfill in the public sector. And then, taking the opportunity to tap into those funding opportunities and those finance tools. It's another area where members of our team through this technical assistance can really provide some value for you. Again, as I mentioned earlier, test those project assumptions. And last but not least, borrow some of those great ideas from other communities. You're probably going to have to adapt them to your own community, but there's some great work being done in housing right now. So with that, just a quick note, these QR codes, the top one there will take you to the MEG website, and the bottom one will take you to a post-event survey. So you can go on there and you can provide feedback to MEG on any of the presentations that were done today. So with that, Adam and I would like to open it up for any questions or discussions. Any?
Thanks, Mike. This is Seth Dyson. I'm with the City of Surprise. Thanks for your presentation. I'm curious about how often the developers will take the recommendations from the city in your experience and kind of what you can get out of it. I know every project is different and every developer is different, but there, I think, has been an assumption in the past where developers need to make money and they don't want to, you know, have the government really tell them what to do. And so they'll do what's allowed legally. And so we'd love to, of course, get into the city recommendation phase of it. So I think we've done some of that in the past, but we'd like to do more of that. So do you have any recommendations for us or any of that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, in some of the communities where I've worked and actually assisted on the development side, I think very much the developers will listen and modify their plans. So it really comes down to a couple things. One is, if you have strong policies or strong regulations on a certain area that you just know that council's not going to go there, they're going to understand that. What I would tell you is, anytime a developer is going to planning and zoning or to a council meeting, they're counting the votes, right? They've talked to everybody, and they know what those issues are. And in many communities, it's great because if a council member or a zoning uh, member of the zoning board, has an issue, they'll bring it up ahead of time. And so, a lot of times what I've seen is when those issues come up, if something is going to planning and zoning, the developers, they'll know they're going to be doing their analysis, their financial analysis, their risk analysis. They're going to know whether they need to make that change and be ready to do it. A lot of times they won't just come and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to do that. They'll wait till they're pushed to either council or planning and zoning on the issue. And if they say, if there's an issue where, hey, this is too tall, this is too intense for this rezoning, you need to remove 2 stories of your housing development or something like that. They're going to want to flush that out before the meeting. They're going to do their numbers, they're going to do their analysis, and they're going to know at that meeting whether that is acceptable or not. And many cases, what I've seen is they are amenable to reasonable changes to meet the policy objectives of a city or community. Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Nothing to add, Mike. Well said.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I really do. That's really kind of goes back to, that some of the early comments about, when that pre-app comes in, you really want to identify all those key broad objectives right from the very beginning. And, some of them are going to be suggestive. And I think if you can work with your developer early on some of those suggested items, they'll work it in, right? They will find a way. If they're building on a site that's, a beloved former, land use, and there's some gesture or some nod that, maybe the community wants, to identify a plaque or, maintain an array of trees or something like that, because of the connection to the community. A lot of times, if you get that in there early, they're amenable to that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, I see something in the chat here. Let's go here. Okay. No questions there.
Mike, this is Seth again. Are you seeing a trend or I guess a trend of people in cities maybe particularly asking developers for set aside affordable units? And is that something that you've seen developers open to?
So, yeah, I mean, it really comes, I mean, yeah, I mean, there is certainly a desire for, housing for a wider socioeconomic portfolio, right, of renters or owners, right? So yeah, so that is desired. Of course, in Arizona, we don't have inclusive zoning. We can't write in that they have to do that. So that's where, leveraging some of these other funding opportunities, grants, loans, programs can help you do that. And so, that is an opportunity. And, it's going to be real interesting, as the missing middle housing gets implemented in Arizona in those communities of 70,000 or more, where a 10-acre development, 20% has to be missing middle housing. That's going to be real interesting. So while it's not necessarily a set aside for affordable housing, it's going to be real interesting to see what those products are and how do they look, how do they relate maybe to a larger development master plan. Hopefully we can see some things like we saw up in Timber Sky and Flagstaff. I think it's a great example of partnerships, getting that mix of housing, those housing, they're not, they're part of that overall master plan. They're right next to the market rate houses because they're high quality. So I think, bringing that quality, leveraging those funding and grant opportunities is really, really great, but also complicated.
Yeah, and so just to put a finer point on it, as Mike mentioned, obviously we can't create inclusionary housing programs in Arizona, based on state law. But you can, in the context of a development agreement, require affordability, right? If you have something that you're providing of benefit to the developer, you can absolutely ask for affordability in the project. If, for example, you own the land, if you're ground leasing the land to the developer, that should be the first thing you ask for, and it's the best way to ensure long-term affordability. Because if you ground lease the land, it's essentially a perpetual affordability requirement if you write it correctly. And so yeah, we see that. We see those kinds of requirements all across the country where governments are contributing things of value, land, lots of gap financing into a project. They get in return, affordability at a certain level.
Oh. Yeah, that's great, Adam. And I would say, if you are a city out there and you haven't really, put a piece of property out there for developers to consider as for housing or attainable housing or affordable housing or workforce housing or student housing, sign up for this technical assistance. Folks like Adam can really, really help you dial in some of those strategies that you can move forward in your community. So yeah, I think it's just a great opportunity. So, thanks to JP Chase and, the other community supporters of this program. It's really great. All right. Well, with that, just like to thank you guys all for attending the session. And again, another commercial for Adam. He'll be talking about funding and financing at 2 p.m.
All aspects of it. Single family,
Yes.
multifamily, we are covering every possible mechanism that you can imagine. So at a high level.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Looking forward to seeing that. All right. All right. Well, I think with that, we will close this down. Mimi, thanks for helping administrating this, and we'll see you back this afternoon.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
See you soon.